Welcome to another episode of Kitchen Sink Dharma. And today I want to talk a little bit about intention. But first of all, I want to tell a story. You might have come across Mullah Nasruddin. He's a Sufi folk character. And he usually appears in the stories as a kind of archetype of the wise fool. And he comes up in lots of stories. There are thousands of Nasruddin stories, and they usually contain a teaching point. So here's one of them. The town square was absolutely crowded for market day, and all of a sudden, Nasruddin comes galloping through the square on his donkey, and it looks like he's about to fall off. He's barely managing to hold on to the reins with one hand, and struggling to keep his turban on with the other. And no one's ever seen Nasruddin or his donkey move this fast. And one of his friends shouts to him, "Hey Nasruddin, where are you going in such a hurry?" And as the donkey gallops past, Nasruddin shouts, "I honestly don't know, you need to ask the donkey." And that just sums up exactly how I feel some days. It's like when we've lost sight of our intentions and we've got absolutely no idea where we're going. And intention's important. In Buddhist teachings, they place a great deal of emphasis on intention. And it's the second path factor in the Eightfold Path. It's wise intention, sammasankappa. And we're encouraged to live a life with intention. And not just to wander around aimlessly, just reacting to all of our experience. We're encouraged to know and understand what our intentions are. And at the heart of all this is the idea that if our intentions are kind and compassionate, our actions are going to be skillful. They're going to lead to a liberated, awakened life. And in this context, wise intention or right intention tends to encompass three things. Firstly, the intention of renunciation. In other words, the willingness to let go. And then there's the intention of freedom from ill will. In other words, the intention that I'm not going to be full of resentment and anger. And thirdly, the intention not to harm others. So another way of framing those last two is to talk about intentions of kindness and generosity and compassion. So wise intention actually becomes the basis for our ethical behaviour. And it gives rise to the next three path factors on the Eightfold Path, which relate to our speech, our actions, and our livelihood. And the idea is that if we don't know our intentions, if we can't know them, or if we can't trust them, we have to be on guard all the time. Because otherwise we don't know where we're going to end up, on the back of our galloping donkey. And if we do look after our intentions, and if we notice that our intentions are harmful or greedy or violent and so on, we're encouraged not to follow through on them. We're encouraged to bring some restraint to bear. So intention has to bear the whole burden of ethics, of living an ethical life. So it's important not just to look at the outcomes of our actions, but also the intentions behind them. And Buddhist psychology tells us that what we feed, we strengthen. And what we don't feed is just going to naturally subside. So this has nothing to do with repressing our emotions. It's about learning to choose what kind of thoughts and intentions we're going to give energy to, we're going to give life to, on the basis that what we cultivate we get better at. And if we cultivate thoughts of cruelty, for example, that becomes the shape of the mind. And a mind that habitually inclines towards ill will and resentment is an unhappy mind. Nursing grudges really means volunteering for suffering. And so equally, a mind that inclines towards kindness and renunciation and non-harming is a happy mind. And we really do have a choice about whether we orient towards one value system or the other. And when it comes to our thoughts, very often we're lost in the storyline. We're too busy just being the victim or the righteous saviour. And the Buddha encourages us to ask, where's all this thinking going? Where's it leading to? Is this wholesome or unwholesome? Is it skillful or unskillful? And there's a commonly used word, panya, a Pali word that's usually translated as wisdom. But actually a better translation is discernment. And that's not something we should be afraid of. We talk about being non-judgmental, but we need to be not afraid of discernment. Because this is about an engaged response to the world. It's one in which we choose what direction we're going in. And how do we know whether our intentions are wholesome or unwholesome? It's not always straightforward, but it's a really useful thing to investigate. And I found it doesn't usually take a lot of effort to be hostile and uptight. It's very easy to be aversive. It often takes a lot more effort to cultivate friendliness and kindness, especially if we're feeling a bit threatened. but we tend to have a lot more residues from unwholesome thoughts and intentions, obsessive ill will, resentment. They just leave us exhausted, and the exhausted mind is vulnerable to further mind states that pull us down into misery. So there's something really valuable in asking, is this direction I'm going in with my thinking, is it leading to my affliction, or is it actually helping me? Is it increasing or decreasing the amount of suffering in the world? So for example, does my internet use trigger craving or fear or anger, confusion, or does it make me peaceful and happy? And discernment also means asking, can I find a way to be more generous? Can I find a way to be more forgiving and compassionate, more patient maybe? So this is also about the realm of perception, the way that we perceive the moment. So with wise intention, we can actually reshape our perception. So for example, if we perceive someone as an enemy, what happens if we practice kindness and friendliness? How can we reshape the way that we perceive them? So it's time for another Nasruddin story. This time Nasruddin was on his way home from Mecca, and midway on the dusty caravan path between the two cities, he met a man, and they greeted each other and sat down to chat, as lonely travellers always do. And the man said, Tell me, Mullah, since you came that way, you must know, what are the people like in the city ahead of me? And Nasruddin asked him a question back. He says, first tell me what the people were like in the town you just came from. And he says, they were despicable, evil people. They were out to get me, all of them. I was lucky to escape their wickedness. And Nasruddin says, well, my friend, they'll be the same in the next city. And I think we bring so much of our own history to the way that we perceive others. It can really end up shaping their perception of us. And if we see others without colouring them with their own emotional history, that really changes the shape of our mind, but also it changes our whole world. And this is where mindfulness comes in. Mindfulness works in many different ways. It's not just about noticing or being present. It's also about remembering to consider whether or not our actions and intentions are going to help us, whether they lead to stress and suffering or whether they reduce stress and suffering. One of the most radical expressions of intention is contained in the Bodhisattva vow. So in very early Buddhism, the word Bodhisattva simply means someone who's on the path to Buddhahood. But in Mahayana Buddhism, which arose in India, then became the main form in parts of Asia, Tibet and East Asia and so on. In Mahayana Buddhism, the term Bodhisattva means the highest form of spiritual path. It's someone who isn't just practicing for their own awakening. Their motivation is to bring an end to all the suffering of all beings. And developing this motivation is called generating bodhicitta, the awakening mind, the awakening heart and mind. And bodhicitta is said to come from a deep compassion for the world, a deep compassion for the suffering of all beings. And the Bodhisattva vow appears in many forms, and one of the versions goes like this. Beings are numberless, I vow to save them. Delusions are inexhaustible, I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless, I vow to enter them. Buddha's way is unsurpassable, I vow to become it. And so there's an interesting set of paradoxes in the Bodhisattva vow. And I used to find it really didn't resonate for me. It felt too grandiose for me. It wasn't something that was really attainable. Am I really vowing to save billions of beings when I had enough of a job finding time to meditate every day? But later on I learned that's okay, we can actually recognise the impossibility of it, but at the same time try and live as if it is possible. And the same paradox exists within metta practice, in other words, practicing kindness and friendliness. So for example, wishing for all beings to be happy. It really is a maturing aspiration. It starts small and it gets bigger. And it encourages us to explore what's possible, to widen our circle of concern, if you like, and to test out the idea that real happiness is going to come from serving the welfare of others, as well as our own welfare. Not looking after the welfare of others instead of looking after ourselves, but as well as. And that does tend to go against the prevailing culture of individualism. And the teacher, Jack Cornfield, once wrote, you can create your own bodhisattva vow. Sit quietly for a time. Let your body and mind be at rest. Then ask your heart, if I were to make a vow to set the compass of my heart to give voice to my highest intention, what would it be? And then listen for an answer. It need not be a poem. It might be as simple as I vow to protect those in danger, or I vow to be kind. Your heart will instruct you. So that's from Jack Cornfield. We don't necessarily have to feel kind, and it's enough to commit to acting with compassion and speaking kindly. And it all starts with intention. It all starts with intention. If we have firm and clear intentions, a sense of what we're doing and why we're doing it, that's what's going to sustain us through all sorts of difficulties. And then whatever comes up, whatever arises in our life, instead of falling back on historical patterns, we can actually turn it into something that heals us. So if your intention is strong, then everything else is going to follow. So that's it. Thank you for listening. Hope you can join me again on Kitchen Sink Dharma.